Well, I just wanted to start there with just tell me a little bit about your reaction when you heard the news about I guess multiple awards at Sundance. What did that feel like?
Well, Jules, I can't wait for your answer. I got a text from a Sundance programmer asking me to hop on a Zoom, and was quickly shuffled into a breakout room and showed a video. And I think, as was documented by our friends in the kitchen, I leaped to my feet and then sat back down. And at the end of that, started to exhale and was told that I needed to hang on for a few more minutes. And then they came out with the audience award. And, it's still just flutters. I think it's very unexpected, and we're very honored and very excited by the momentum behind the film. And I think one of the things that we say in all circuits, public and private, is we made the film with each other, for each other, with big hopes, but we were always going to be okay to be the kind of weirdo outsiders who were trying to do documentary differently, and understanding that we were going to ruffle some feathers along the way, and to feel really good about those choices. And so to be encouraged and seen in these ways is very special to me.
Yeah, I share that same sort of feeling of, it was so exciting and so shocking. I couldn't quite assimilate that there were two awards when I found out. It took me a few minutes for that to settle in. And of course, we've all been celebrating and kind of participating in this virtual Sundance. And as a team, we've been spread out, really around the world. So it was really kind of one of those beautiful moments of texts and messages pouring in, and everyone flooding to social media. And, one of the things that I said, on Twitter that I've really trying to sit with is, like, of course, it feels like such an honor and validation for this project and for our team, for this film to be recognized, not just by Sundance, but I think to be recognized by a more general audience, and to understand that in some ways, I think what an award means for a lot of us is like a recognition that not only did we tell the story that we needed to tell, for the kind of audiences who feel closest to the project, and, that is to say, tell a story for trans people, for queer people, but also a story that's resonating in the ways that we thought it would or hoped it would with more folks than just that. And so in that sense, I think, the award is also kind of this way of showing love to everyone out in the world doing other work that has yet to receive that kind of recognition, or we're breaking in and kind of getting legibility and getting people not just sort of eyes on things, but having people really show that they understand, that they're willing to learn with and learn from projects. I mean, that to me is one of the most exciting forms of validation that comes along with this kind of recognition.
Yeah. So let's jump in. I'd like to hear from both of you to kind of set up who Agnes was and why, give sort of the historical importance of Agnes as a figure, and then why you wanted to reframe the story and what the kind of decisions you made to make the movie in the ways you do. And I'll leave it up to you to explain that. To why did you make those decisions? Why did you want to tell the story in this way? So I'm curious to hear you both on that.
Jules, do you want to start and flip to me for the find and talk about some of the execution?
Yeah, well, Agnes is this really kind of iconic figure in the history of social science. So, fairly narrow terrain there. Those in the know her name. She kind of is this larger than life character, in part because of this remarkable experience she had at UCLA, and also the way that she really contested and troubled a lot of the kinds of heavyweights in academia, in social science, psychology, and medicine in that era. And she sort of lingered on kind of like as this cautionary tale in many ways, or as this sort of case study in the the deceit of trans people, or the difficulty of working with trans people. And so, she's always kind of loomed large in that sense. And I think for a lot of people in our community, she, on the contrary, was sort of like a bit of a hero, someone, we looked up to, who was able to outwit, some pretty powerful men and get what she needed to get. And, went on, we hope, to live a life that was happy to her. But, in both ways, in that sense, Agnes is sort of like a story. She's less a person and more like a symbol, depending on whether you want to read that as a symbol of something positive or something negative, right? And it was kind of that enduring legacy that makes her such a compelling story. I mean, just like the details are incredible. It's the kind of thing you want to see brought to life and dramatized. But because she had really taken on this kind of larger than life meaning for so many different groups of people, I think we all felt that it was really important to figure out how to handle that responsibly and thoughtfully. And in some ways, the only thing you can do is admit it's not up to us to pick which version of the story is true, or to say, okay, but here's the real story. Instead, how could we, create a project that would give the audience the tools they needed to problematize that whole thing? And so in some ways, it's like in this kind of system of icons that we have in culture in general, but especially for trans people, where we want to find that perfect exemplary person who can incarnate everything about trans people, or everything about the moment, the things we're interested in, or the politics that come with gender. Agnes has been one of those people. And so in that sense, she's really one of those people that's like, you just can't refuse her. She's out there. She's too interesting. She's too important, but the risks and the rewards are kind of equally high.
Yeah. And, as we explore in the film through a series of very fortunate archival events, my friend and collaborator, Kristen Schilt, and I found Agnes's transcripts alongside the transcripts of many others who were in those rooms at the same time. And immediately, to Jules's point, we were able to trouble the terms of the engagement. And one of the things that was so compelling to me was to pay less attention to the extraordinary life details being disclosed in these encounters and to look at the questions. And immediately, you start paying attention to the type of questions being asked by researchers at the time, you can find and encounter resonances to the ways in which trans people are questioned in and by and through the media. And so in our film, we collapse those contexts and we try to think about medicine and media simultaneously as these engines, these institutional engines that produce enduring meaning about trans and gender nonconforming people. And depending on how much time you have, we can keep talking about the various formal choices that we make, but that's what arrives us in the film.
Yeah. And I'm curious about the choice to use trans actors in all the roles. What did you want to do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be perfectly clear and succinct, there is no other way to make a project like this, in part because we are not only asking for a kind of willingness to experiment and to perform, but we're thinking about inhabitation. We're thinking about ghosting and haunting and a kind of being with that far exceeds the bounds of our understanding of what it means to play a role or to think about the experiences of another. And so it was critical for us that the people who were in our project were those most impacted or closest to the kinds of stories we were trying to tell, but also those that would come to the proverbial talk show table with something that they wanted to say. And the thing about our cast that I think is so important and enduring is that we are working with people who have organized their lives for various reasons, mostly artistic, around a kind of publicness. So these are trans people who are reckoning with a kind of public profile. And that's a kind of meta layer, thinking about iconicity and celebrity and singularity that runs through from Agnes right until the present. So we wanted people who were willing to say, this is what it means, and these are the choices that I'm making.
So just for both of you, what do you hope in this process of going through making this film and really studying the life of Agnes and the meaning of Agnes? What do you guys have done all the work. What do you hope that the audience takes away from all this work that you guys have done to explore this life and the larger meaning for society?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's related to a question that we get asked often, which is, what is your film about? And I always laugh because I feel like there's like easily 10 different answers to what our film is about. And so I think similarly, there are so many different ways to answer what we hope. And, don't tell anyone other than this recording that, I'm not really particularly worried if you end our film and you end up forgetting about Agnes. For me, the agenda is much deeper and is much more process-based around trying to make a world within and outside of a film that does right by its people. And what's possible when we trouble the terms together. And, I'm borrowing from an answer that Jules gives elsewhere, where I think collectively we're trying to engage a much more complex portrait about what it means to engage trans history. And also for me, what it means to engage documentary. I think we can have much higher expectations of documentary. And I think that we can have emotionally fulfilling engagements with films that don't tell us how to feel. And I hope that our film is an example, one of many, that's trying to think about those things together.
Yeah, I think in some ways, right? It's like, is Framing Agnes a film about Agnes? I suppose, yeah, I guess we have to say it is. But it's actually also a film about us and you. It's a film about the relationship between trans people and audience. And so in that sense, I want to say what people are going to take away from it is their experience of coming with us on a journey and actually being an active part of the process of asking questions and reflecting and seeing how far we can push the limits of telling stories and telling stories better. And kind of, I think, sort of raising the bar for how we understand the role of culture and media in portraying and affecting trans life, because it seems to me like so many of our public conversations these days about trans inclusion or trans politics, there's a lot of learning being asked of people. It's like, hey, you got to do your 101, you got to read the books, you got to learn all the glossary, we need you to know the history, right? And I think part of what this film is saying is like, well, sure, we got content and info for you if you want to do that, but that's actually not the prerequisite to understanding what's interesting or valuable about trans people's stories and trans people's lives. And actually, that's a process that already includes everyone, regardless of your identity, whether you know it or not. And so I think what this film is trying to do is give us all the tools to sort through that kind of uncomfortable, kind of thrilling reality and see kind of what we could do if we start to take seriously that we're all kind of related in these bigger machines that represent us and catalog our history and preserve it, and then later we get a chance to put on screen. So in some ways, I think the big lesson, big takeaway for me is that collaboration extends from the production of the film to the viewing and now is out in the world. And so I hope the most exciting answer to this question is we don't know yet. And I think there's a lot more to come.